this particular session, we are going to go over system login, navigation, and data entry. We will start by logging into Datum, then show you how to navigate the various Datum applications. We will also show you how to arrange these applications. We will then show you how to alter your Datum user profile, including your email details as well as your password details. Next, we will move on to data entry, and we will show you how to select and find locations in the organization unit hierarchy. When you're selecting a data set, we will show you how to define the parameters that are necessary. This includes the organization unit, the data set, the period, and the implementing mechanism. We will then show you how to navigate the data sets, including all your service delivery types and your data types, as well as how you enter data into Datum. And then we will show you some of the extra data entry features, including validation rules and completing your data entry. So let's go ahead and move on to the demonstration. So I'm going to demonstrate the system login and navigation as well as data entry in this video for you. I'm going to use the training environment, and you'll see here it says Datum Training. That way you can also try and replicate anything that I'm doing within the training environment. You've received logins for this environment already, and you can use this to train your partners as well as to practice skills yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to enter my username. I'm going to enter my password in the bottom. Just hit enter, and that will sign me in. Now when I first log in, what I see is what we call a dashboard. Now we'll talk about the dashboard a lot more later on when you can add graphs and tables and maps and different types of analysis for a quick overview. In the training environment, what you see is the training resources when you first log in. These resources are actually the exercises that we've gone through during the regional trainings. These are also available on Zendesk, and if you haven't had a chance to go through these yet, it's a good chance to just download these. They're all in PDF format, and you can have a look and try and do some of these just to understand how Datum works, as well as the various tools that are available for you to use in Datum. So when I'm navigating in Datum, I have two icons. On the top right hand side corner, I have this apps and profile icon. Now you can see just by hovering over them, it gives me my options. So if I hover over the apps icon, you'll see all the applications associated with your user account. Now you can click these up and down arrows to navigate if you want to see more apps. So if I click down, you'll see a couple more apps appear. I can also search for apps by typing in the name of the app, and it will filter the application for me. Now, if I want to actually arrange the order of these applications, I can also do that. If I click on More Apps, this will bring me to all of the applications that are available to me. You'll see here these top 9 apps are what you see when you hover over the apps icon immediately before you click on these up or down arrows. You'll see there's a dividing line right here, and this dividing line separates which 9 apps will appear up top. So if I want to arrange the order of these applications, I can simply drag and drop, and then you'll see when you hover over the apps, this new order is now reflected. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard, just hover over apps and click on dashboard. Now let's say I also want to adjust some settings in my profile. So for instance, I signed up with a personal email account, and now I want to change this to a professional account, or I want to change my password. If I hover over profile and click on account, you'll see here the details that I can update. So I can change my password. Now the password follows a couple rules. It has to have at least one capital letter and one number, and it also has to be at least 8 characters long. So if I violate those rules, it will give me a prompt saying the password must contain at least one capital letter and 1 digit. And then if it's not long enough, it will say please enter a value between 8 and 35 characters long. I can also update my email here. I just click on save. Okay, what's happened is when you see this prompt, wrong password, I've actually entered the wrong password in my old password. So I have to make sure that that's correct. So try again. Okay, and when that's successful, you'll see this account was updated. That means the new details are saved, and next time I log in, I will have to enter in the new password that I've entered, and as well my email details will now be updated. Okay, so we've gone through some basics in terms of navigating the system. Now let's talk a bit about the data entry process and the tools that are available for you during data entry. So if I click on apps and I search for data entry, so I can see it here, and if I just search, it'll also filter that out for me. I go ahead and click on that. It's going to load the data entry application for me to use. Now on the left hand side, you see that this country, Demoland, is highlighted in orange. This is the start of the organization unit or operating unit hierarchy. So if I click on this plus icon, it's going to expand this and display the immediate organization units or operating units directly underneath Demoland. If I click on that plus again, it'll continue to give me the levels that are lower in that hierarchy. If I click on a site, it will highlight the site. So you can see now that this particular site is highlighted in orange. It changed from Demoland to the site that I've selected. You'll also see that the site has been selected as my organization unit here. Now there's a couple ways to find different sites or districts or regions. You can find it by clicking on the hierarchy using these plus signs. You can also click on this magnifying glass and search for the particular site that you're interested in. So I type it in. You can see here it appears for me. I click on that and it'll automatically find the site for me. So now that I've found my site, I need to select my data set. Now I'm at the site level, so what should be available to me are facility-based data sets. So you'll see here I have MER results and MER targets facility-based. So let's select targets. The next thing I do is select my period. So these should be the financial year, financial October, because this is a targets-based data set. Now you'll see what I mean if I select MER results and I look at the periods. Now I have quarters. So after I've selected the organization unit, the data set, the period, then I select my funding mechanism. So in the training environment, there's only one funding mechanism associated with each account. In the production environment, depending on your user role, you might have more than one funding mechanism. So you just need to find the appropriate funding mechanism and ensure that you select that. So upon selecting the funding mechanism, the data entry screen will load automatically for me. I'll see here on the left hand side all my different service types, and I'll see up top my data types, DSD and TA. You can also see here the coloring scheme, which tells you when to report the different types of data. If I click on this collapse all button, you'll see here I can see different sections of the data set that are then coded according to this legend color scheme up top. And I can just hit expand on one section to expand one particular section. I can collapse it again, and then of course I can expand all the sections at once by clicking on expand all. So if I want to navigate the different service delivery types, I just choose one of the service delivery types on the left hand side. So if I click on HTC, it'll load the HTC form for me. The same goes for the data types. So if I want to enter against TA data, I would click on TA, and you'll see here that the title for the data sets will change. So this will say TA SDI. When I'm on DSD, it'll say DSD. So just make sure that when you're entering data, you select the appropriate variables or parameters for the data set. So make sure you select the appropriate organization unit, data set, period, funding mechanism, the data type, and of course the service delivery area. The reason why I'm reinforcing this concept is because it's very difficult to actually move the data over if I've, say, selected the wrong funding mechanism or the wrong period. So it's very important to make sure that we define these variables correctly when we're selecting the parameters for our data entry. So let's look at a couple features of data entry when I enter data. So you'll see here when I select one of the data items or indicators in Datum, the name changes up here to tell me the name of the data item. So here I see TX undetect and DSD. So this is the numerator value for TX undetect, and I'll just enter something. Now I can use tab or I can use enter to move between the various data items on the form. You'll see when I first entered the numerator value, it changed from yellow to green. When it changes to green, that means the data value is now saved. So you'll see here now that I'm in the disaggregates. I see here TX undetect and DSD age/sex. And we'll get into a discussion about the naming convention so you can identify data during analysis as well later on. So let's enter a couple items for the disaggregates. Now you'll see here I've made it such that the disaggregates are equal to the numerator, so the total cases. Now I haven't defined a denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now what happens if I actually make these disaggregates greater than the numerator total? Now what happens when you've actually finished data entry for all of the service delivery types as well as for DSD and TA data types? I would go down to the bottom and I would run validation. What running validation does, it runs a set of validation rules, which are logical constructs that tell us, okay, well, it checks if the subtotal is greater than the total, for instance. So let's run the validation and see what happens. So it tells me now that the subtotals are greater than the actual numerator. You can see here from the variable names, undetect and DSD should be greater than or equal to undetect and DSD age and sex. Now if I go back and change this and run the validation again, so the validation is passed. When you see the screen check mark, it means everything's okay. So if I've entered data against all my service delivery types and all my data types, and I've completed data entry for this particular site, I run the validation and then I click complete. It'll give you a prompt and you just hit OK. Now what this means is that data entry on this particular data set has been completed, and that registers that in the system. So if someone wants to check how many sites have had data entered against them, they can go ahead and do that when after that complete button is clicked. This does not mean that the data has been submitted for approval. We will go over that concept a little bit later on. Now on top of the entry here for the logical validation rules, I also have field validation rules that ensure I'm entering the right type of data. So for instance, we know that in this case, for this particular form, I should be entering numerical data. So if I enter text-based data, it will give me a prompt. The value must be an integer. So I hit OK, and it's just going to remove that text-based data from the field. Now, even though I've hit complete, I can still change the data values. So you'll see here, even if I change the data values, it will save them in green. I don't necessarily have to hit the complete button again. It's already been hit. So it's already registered as a form that's been entered into the system. So I've shown you the facility-based data sets at the site level. Now, what happens when we go to the district? If I go to the district, you'll see now I have the community-based forms. And I perform the same steps in order to bring up the district-based data sets. Select my organization unit, select my data set, my period, and my funding mechanism. And then you'll see, similar to the facility-based data sets, we have our service delivery areas, and then of course our data types up top. So if I'm looking for a country-based data set, I will need to make sure that I select the country. A district-based or community-based data set, I need to make sure I'm selecting the appropriate level. Now, of course, depending on the country you are in, you might not necessarily have country, region, district, and site as your hierarchy, but you can think about how you can apply these different levels back home in your own country. Right, so I think those are most of the features of data entry. So just remember to select these variables and parameters appropriately, that you can navigate your service delivery areas and your data types. There's of course logical validation rules as well as text-based validation rules. You can use these collapse buttons to navigate your forms. When you're done entering your data, run the validation, make sure it passes all the validation rules, and then of course hit complete. Now, complete does not mean it's submitted, it just means that you've entered data against the form and someone can go ahead and check if that's been completed.